The Grand Conclave Chamber was the largest structure ever built by intelligent life. It floated in the empty space between three stars, a palace of crystal and light that could hold millions. Today, representatives from 4,000 species filled its halls. They had come to discuss the same thing they always discussed. War was coming to the galaxy's edge, and they had gathered to do nothing about it. Ambassador sat in the human section. It was a small section, tucked away in the back corner of the chamber. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for only 87 years. In a room full of civilizations that measured their histories in millions of years, humans were bobbies. Loud, violent, emotional bobbies that the elder races tolerated the way one tolerates a screaming child at a formal dinner. Was 63 years old. Her hair had turned gray at the temples, and lines marked her face from years of smiling at beings who looked down on her species. She had been Earth's ambassador for 11 years. In that time, she had learned many things. She had learned that the council moved slowly. She had learned that the elder races valued stability above all else. And she had learned that when the powerful refused to act, the weak always suffered. The High Speaker stood at the center of the chamber. There were beings of pure light, ancient beyond measure. Their speaker had witnessed the birth and death of stars. Its voice rang through the chamber like music, translating into 10,000 languages at once. The hegemony has expanded into 3 more systems, the speaker announced. We have received reports of civilian casualties. The Council extends its deepest sympathies to the affected populations. Watch the holographic display showing the conquered systems, 3 small dots blinking red. Each dot represented millions of lives now under control. There were predators. They did not conquer to build, they conquered to feed. The Council proposes additional economic sanctions, the speaker continued. We will restrict access to galactic trade networks. We will issue formal condemnation through all diplomatic channels. Around the chamber, representatives nodded their approval. The delegation, beings of blue water held in transparent suits, clicked their agreement. The Moravian hive mind pulsed with satisfaction. The observers, massive creatures of stone and metal, remained still and silent. Stood up. The chamber grew quiet. Humans rarely spoke at full council sessions. When they did, it was usually to agree with whatever the elder races had decided. But something in its posture made the representatives pay attention. The council recognizes the representative from Earth, the High Speaker said. There was a note of surprise in its musical voice. Walk to the speaking platform. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. She was a small figure in that vast chamber, surrounded by beings that could crush her without effort. But she did not look small. She looked like someone who had made a decision. 3 systems have fallen, said. Her voice was calm and clear. Before that, it was 5 systems. Before that, 12. They have been expanding for 200 years. In that time, the Council has issued 947 formal condemnations. We have imposed sanctions 63 times. We have expressed our deepest sympathies on 412 occasions. She paused. The chamber was completely silent. None of it has worked. They do not care about our condemnations. They do not need our trade networks. They expand because they are strong and their victims are weak, and they know that no one will stop them. The High Speaker's light flickered with displeasure. What would the human representative suggest? Looked directly at the ancient being. Military intervention. A unified fleet to push them back to their original borders. Protection for the species they have conquered. The chamber exploded. Sounds of horror and outrage filled the air. Clicking, whistling, telepathic waves of disapproval crashed against mind. The Moravian hive mind broadcast its shock so strongly that several nearby delegates collapsed. They turned dark shades of purple, their species' sign of extreme distress. The High Speaker raised its appendages, and slowly the chamber returned to order. The human representative does not understand, the speaker said. Its voice carried the weight of millions of years. We do not fight because we choose not to fight. We do not fight because fighting nearly destroyed all intelligent life in this galaxy. A holographic display appeared above the chamber. It showed a galaxy burning, stars exploding, entire species reduced to ash. Had seen this display before. Every human child learned about the Axiom conflict in school. 2 million years ago, the galaxy had gone to war. When the war ended, 90% of all intelligent species were extinct. The survivors had built the council on one simple principle: never again. We understand the weight of history, said, but history does not justify letting the innocent suffer. They are not some great galactic power. They are bullies who prey on the weak because they know the strong will not act. We could stop them. We choose not to. The high speaker's light turned cold. You have been spacefaring for less than 3 centuries. You do not understand how civilizations endure. We survive by not fighting. This is wisdom that your species has not yet learned. Felt the words hit her like physical blows. She had heard variations of this speech many times. Humans were young. Humans were violent. Humans did not understand. The elder races always knew better. She thought about New Helsinki. She thought about the colony ship that had landed there 40 years ago, full of families looking for a new home. She thought about the raiders who had come 6 months later. The council had urged restraint. Humanity had publicly. What had happened to those raiders was not in any official record, but they had never raided human space again. Returned to her seat. She said nothing more for the rest of the session. The council voted to continue sanctions. The delegation, a species directly in this path, begged for military protection. The council offered them assistance in relocating their population. After the session ended, walked back to the human diplomatic quarters. Her staff waited for her, their faces carefully blank. They had watched the session. They knew what had happened. Get me a secure channel to Earth, said. Quantum encrypted, highest priority. Her communications officer nodded and left. Stood at the window, looking out at the stars. So many stars, so many worlds, so many species that had learned to survive by looking away from suffering. When the channel was ready, sent a single message. It contained only 2 words, Protocol Omega. She waited, minutes passed, then hours. Finally, a response came. It was also brief. Confirmed, you have full authorization. Godspeed, Ambassador. Read the message 3 times. Then she deleted it, along with every trace that it had ever existed. In her years as ambassador, she had learned many things about the Galactic Council. She had learned that they were ancient and wise and powerful. She had learned that they had kept the peace for 12,000 years. But she had also learned that their peace was built on looking away, on letting the weak suffer so the strong could remain comfortable, on calling cowardice wisdom and inaction restraint. Humanity had tried to fit in. For 87 years they had softened themselves, hidden their nature, told their children that this was how civilized species behaved. Was tired of fitting in. She began drafting a speech. It would be short, it would be simple, and when she delivered it, the galaxy would learn something that the elder races had never bothered to discover. Humanity had been holding back, and they were done. 2 million years ago, the galaxy had burned. They kept the records. They were the oldest surviving species, beings of light who had watched civilizations rise and fall like waves on a cosmic ocean. In their memory banks, they stored the truth of what war had cost. It had started, as wars often do, with a small disagreement. 2 species claimed the same world. Neither would compromise. Allies were called. Enemies were made. Within a century, half the galaxy was fighting. Within 5 centuries, stars were being used as weapons. The Axiom conflict killed trillions. Not millions. Not billions. Trillions. Entire species vanished overnight. Worlds were cracked open like eggs. The fabric of space itself was torn in places that still had not healed. When the fighting finally stopped, 90% of all intelligent life was gone. The survivors looked at what they had done and swore it would never happen again. The Galactic Council was born from that promise. For 12,000 years it had kept the peace, not through strength but through patience, through diplomacy, through the simple understanding that war was worse than any alternative. This was the history that the elder races carried in their hearts. This was why they would not fight, but knew another history, a smaller history, a human history. She sat in her quarters, watching old footage on a private screen. The video was 40 years old, recorded by a security camera on a world called New Helsinki. The colony had been young. 3,000 humans had landed there 2 years before, building homes and farms on a world with purple skies and gentle seasons. They had been happy. The footage showed children playing in fields of alien wheat. It showed couples walking hand in hand through streets that smelled of fresh lumber. It showed old people sitting on porches, watching the sun set over mountains that had never known human footsteps before. Then the came. Forced herself to watch. She had watched this footage many times. It never got easier. The ships descended like black clouds. The screaming started. The colony's distress signal went out to every human world, every council outpost, every ship within range. The council's response arrived within hours. A formal message urging restraint, a reminder that military action was forbidden, an offer to mediate talks with the hegemony. 3 days later, when human rescue ships finally reached New Helsinki, they found 217 survivors out of 3,000 colonists. The rest were dead or taken. They had not been interested in the land or the resources. They had been interested in the people. Turned off the footage, she had seen enough. The council had never learned what happened next. They believed that humanity had followed their instructions. They believed that the humans had pursued diplomatic channels, filed formal protests, accepted compensation for their losses. The truth was different. 6 months after New Helsinki, a raiding fleet vanished. 40 ships, 3,000 warriors gone without a trace. They searched for them. They never found so much as a piece of debris. A year later, 3 supply stations on the edge of their territory exploded simultaneously. Official reports blamed mechanical failure. Unofficial reports spoke of ghost ships that appeared from nowhere, struck without warning, and disappeared before anyone could respond. Within 5 years, they had quietly removed humans from their list of acceptable targets. No announcement was made. No explanation was given. They simply stopped coming. The council called it a diplomatic success. They praised humanity for their restraint, for their willingness to work within the system. They never asked why they had suddenly lost interest in human space. Humanity never told them. Now, 40 years later, they were expanding again. Not toward human space, but toward the soft underbelly of the galaxy, where weak species huddled under council protection that existed only on paper. Watched the news feeds from the conquered systems. She saw the refugee ships flooding into council space, carrying families who had lost everything. She saw the pleading for help at council sessions, their translator devices struggling to convey the depth of their desperation. The council offered resettlement assistance. They offered counseling services. They offered everything except the one thing that would actually help. Received regular reports from Earth. The messages were encrypted so heavily that decoding them took specialized equipment and 3 separate authorization codes. The reports told her what the council did not know. For 87 years, humanity had been building. Not openly. The council had strict limits on military development. New members were allowed small defense forces, nothing more. Humanity had followed these rules to the letter. Their official navy was tiny, barely enough to patrol their own systems. But humans had learned long ago that there was a difference between rules and reality. In asteroid fields throughout human space, factories worked in silence. They built ships that no council inspector ever saw. They armed those ships with weapons that human scientists had developed in secret laboratories hidden behind corporate logos and university research grants. In hollowed moons and abandoned mining stations, crews trained for wars that might never come. They ran simulations. They studied every potential enemy. They prepared for the day when the Council's peace would fail. Knew the numbers. The real numbers, not the ones in Council databases. She knew that humanity's hidden fleet outnumbered their official navy by a factor of 20. She knew that human weapons technology had advanced far beyond what the elder races believed possible. She also knew that none of it mattered if they never used it. For 40 years, humanity had watched the prey on others. They had watched the Council do nothing. They had told themselves that this was the price of membership, that belonging to galactic civilization meant accepting its flaws. But the footage from New Helsinki played in its mind. The screaming, the fire, the children who never came home. Humanity had joined the Council hopping to become better, hopping to learn from species who had achieved what humans only dreamed of. Instead, they had learned that the galaxy's greatest civilizations had survived by closing their eyes. Looked at the message she had sent to Earth, Protocol Omega, 2 words that meant humanity was done pretending. She began preparing her speech. The Council would meet again in 3 days for a full assembly. Every species would be represented. The elder races would expect her to sit quietly in the back, to accept their wisdom, to play the role of the obedient newcomer. They were going to be disappointed. Thought about the young analysts back on Earth who had worked their entire careers in the shadows. She thought about the pilots who had trained on ships that officially did not exist. She thought about the scientists who had developed weapons they hoped would never be needed. All of them had been waiting for the Council to change, waiting for the elder races to finally act, waiting for someone to care about the weak and the suffering. They had waited long enough. In 3 days, would stand before the galaxy and tell them the truth. Humanity was leaving, not because they wanted war, but because they could no longer stomach peace built on the suffering of innocence. She finished her speech and read it once. Then she deleted it and started over. The words had to be perfect, not angry, not threatening, just final. When she was done, she sent a copy to Earth. The response came within the hour. "We stand with you, Ambassador, all of us." Allowed herself a small smile. Then she went to sleep. She would need her strength for what was coming. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity had been hiding, and they were going to be afraid. The Grand Conclave chamber was full. Every species had sent their representatives. 4,000 civilizations gathered under one roof to discuss the continuing crisis at the galactic frontier. That had taken 2 more systems since the last meeting. 18 million beings were now under their control. Ambassador walked through the human section toward the speaking platform. Her staff followed behind her, their faces carefully blank. They knew what was about to happen. The rest of the galaxy did not. The high speaker glowed at the center of the chamber. Its light had dimmed slightly over the past weeks, a sign of stress in a being that had lived for millions of years. The crisis was wearing on everyone. "The Council recognizes the representative from Earth," the speaker announced. "Ambassador has requested time to address the full assembly." Stepped onto the platform. The chamber fell silent. Millions of eyes, sensors, and other organs of perception focused on the small human woman standing alone in that vast space. She did not look nervous. She did not look angry. She looked like someone who had already made peace with what she was about to do. "Thank you, High Speaker," said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "I will be brief." She paused. In the human section, her staff held their breath. "The United Earth government formally withdraws from the Galactic Council," said, "effective immediately." For a moment nothing happened. The words hung in the air, too strange to process. Then the chamber erupted. Sounds of shock and confusion filled the space. The delegates turned colors that had no name in human language. The Moravian hive mind broadcast waves of disbelief so strong that several nearby representatives lost consciousness. The observers, who had not moved in 10,000 years, shifted in their seats. The high speaker raised its appendages. Slowly, very slowly, the chamber returned to something like order. "The human representative will explain," the speaker said. Its voice had lost its musical quality. Now it sounded like breaking glass. Nodded, of course. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes and sensors of species that had looked down on humanity for 87 years. For almost a century, humanity has been part of this council. We joined because we believed in what you represented: peace, cooperation, the idea that intelligent species could work together instead of destroying each other. She paused. "We were wrong." The chamber stirred, but no one interrupted. "You have not built peace," continued. "You have built comfort, comfort for the strong, purchased with the suffering of the weak. When they take a world, you send condemnations. When refugees flee their homes, you offer resettlement. When species beg for protection, you give them counseling." Her voice remained calm, but each word landed like a hammer blow. "We adapted. We softened ourselves. We told our children that this was wisdom, that ancient species understood things we could not. We hid our nature because we wanted to belong." She shook her head slowly. "We were wrong about that too." The high speaker moved forward. Its light had turned a cold, sharp blue. "The human representative speaks of things she does not understand. We have maintained peace for 12,000 years. We have prevented the wars that would destroy everything." "No," said. "You have prevented the wars that would affect you. They have been conquering worlds for 2 centuries. You let them because those worlds were far away and their people were weak. Your peace is a lie you tell yourselves so you can sleep at night." The chamber trembled with outrage, but was not finished. "Humanity is leaving the council because we can no longer pretend. We cannot sit in this chamber and watch innocent people suffer while we discuss sanctions and express sympathy. We will not." The representative rose. They were analytical beings, known for their logic and calm. "What do you intend to do?" they asked. Looked at them. "We intend to stop the—" A ripple of something moved through the chamber. Not quite laughter, something more like disbelief mixed with pity. "You cannot defeat the alone," they said. "Your fleet is a fraction of theirs. We have studied the numbers. Any military action would result in your destruction." Smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who knows something that others do not. "You have studied the numbers in your databases," she said. "The ships we were required to register, the weapons we were permitted to have." She paused. "You never asked what else we might have built." The chamber went very still. "For 87 years, humanity has followed your rules," continued. "We have been the good newcomers, the obedient children, the species that knew its place. We showed you what you expected to see." She looked directly at the high speaker. "You never thought to look deeper. You never asked what we were doing in the asteroid fields that council ships do not visit. You never wondered why our mining operations needed so many resources. You never questioned why our research stations required such heavy shielding." The high speaker's light flickered. For the first time the ancient being looked uncertain. "You assumed we were what we appeared to be," said. "Young, weak, controllable. You were wrong." She stepped back from the platform. "Humanity withdraws its ambassadors, its trade agreements, its scientific exchanges, and its mutual defense obligations. We are no longer bound by your treaties. We are no longer limited by your rules." She turned to walk away, then stopped. "One more thing," she said, her back still to the chamber. "They prey on the weak because they believe no one will stop them. In 48 hours they will learn otherwise." Then she walked out. Her staff followed. The doors sealed behind them with a sound that echoed through the chamber like the closing of a tomb. For a long moment, no one spoke. The representatives of 4,000 civilizations sat in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. The High Speaker was the first to move. It turned to its closest advisor, a younger whose light pulsed with confusion. "Contact our intelligence services," the speaker said. Its voice was barely a whisper. "I want everything we have on human military capabilities, everything." The advisor hurried away. The speaker remained at the center of the chamber, its ancient mind working through possibilities it had never considered. In all its millions of years, the speaker had seen many things. It had watched civilizations rise and fall. It had witnessed the birth of stars and the death of worlds. It had guided the council through crises that would have broken lesser beings. But it had never seen this. A species walking away. A species that had hidden itself in plain sight. A species that had played the role of the obedient child while building something terrible in the shadows. The speaker thought about the humans it had known over the years, the diplomats who smiled and nodded, the scientists who shared their research, the merchants who traded fairly. They had all seemed so harmless, so young, so eager to please. Now the speaker wondered how much of that had been real, and how much had been a mask. In the human quarters was already preparing to leave. Her ship would depart within the hour. Behind her, the grand conclave chamber buzzed with fear and confusion. She did not look back. There was nothing left to say. The walking away was complete. Now came the hard part. The intelligence report landed on the High Speaker's desk 6 hours after the humans left. It was the most complete assessment of human military capabilities that Council analysts had ever compiled. The speaker read it 3 times, certain there had been a mistake. There had not been a mistake. A young analyst named had made the breakthrough. She had started with the obvious data, the registered ships and declared weapons that every council member was required to report. The numbers were small. Humanity's official navy consisted of 243 vessels, most of them light patrol craft. Their weapons were standard, their technology unremarkable. But it had not stopped there. She had dug into trade records. She had analyzed resource flows. She had studied the cargo manifests of human merchant vessels going back 60 years. What she found did not match the official numbers, not even close. The humans were importing raw materials at 10 times the rate their registered industries could use. They were moving processed metals and rare elements to locations that did not appear on any map. They were building things, and they were building them somewhere that council sensors could not see. Had spent 3 days tracking the discrepancies. She had mapped the routes of suspicious vessels. She had analyzed energy signatures from remote regions of human space. She had cross-referenced everything with the locations of asteroid fields, abandoned stations, and hollowed moons. The picture that emerged was terrifying. Humanity had been building a shadow fleet for almost 8 decades, ships that existed on no registry, weapons that no council inspector had ever seen, an entire military infrastructure hidden in the dark spaces between stars. When calculated the estimated tonnage, she had to sit down. She ran the numbers again, then again. Then she called her supervisor, who called his supervisor, who called the intelligence director. The final estimate was conservative. Even so, it suggested that humanity's hidden fleet was at least 15 times larger than their official navy, possibly more, and their weapons technology appeared to be at least 2 generations ahead of what they had shared with the council. The High Speaker read the report and felt something it had not felt in 10,000 years. Fear. Meanwhile, at the edge of space, the predators were celebrating. The commander was named. He was old for his species, from 100 raids, respected for his cruelty. His fleet had just finished conquering a world called Threshold, home to a species of gentle beings who had never developed weapons. The conquest had been easy. The liked easy. Was reviewing the prisoner counts when his communications officer interrupted him. "Commander, we are detecting ships on the edge of our sensor range." Was not concerned. The Council never sent ships this far out, and no other power in the region had the strength to challenge him. "How many ships?" he asked. The officer was quiet for a moment. Then, "Commander, I am reading over 3,000 contacts." Stood up. That was impossible. No fleet in the galaxy was that large. Not even the at the height of their power could field 3,000 ships. "Source?" he demanded. "Unknown. They emerged from fold space approximately 10 minutes ago. They are holding position at the system's edge." The officer paused. "Commander, they are broadcasting." "Let me hear it." The bridge speakers crackled, and then a human voice filled the air. It was a woman's voice, calm and clear. "This is Admiral Sarah of the United Earth Navy. You have 24 hours to withdraw from all occupied systems and return all surviving prisoners. This offer will not be repeated." Stared at the tactical display. 3,000 ships, 3,000 human ships that should not exist. Then he started to laugh. "Humans," he said. "The humans are threatening us." He laughed harder. "These are the children who joined the Council less than a century ago. These are the soft ones who follow rules and beg for permission." His bridge crew joined his laughter. The idea was absurd. Humanity was weak. Everyone knew this. They had never fought a real war. They had never faced a true predator. They were nothing. "Ignore them," ordered. "They are bluffing. When they see we are not afraid, they will run back to their council masters." 24 hours passed. The human fleet did not move. Both sides waited. Then the humans attacked. It was not like any battle had ever seen. The human ships did not behave like the ships of other species. They did not form lines. They did not advance in predictable patterns. They moved like a swarm of insects, coordinated but chaotic, impossible to track. The first wave hit the defensive perimeter and went through it like water through sand. Ships that had served for decades vanished in seconds. His sensors could not track the human weapons. His shields could not stop them. "Return fire," screamed. "All ships return fire." His fleet responded. 1,000 vessels opened up with everything they had. The space around the human formation filled with energy and metal. The humans did not slow down. They twisted and turned through the barrage, their ships dancing between the shots with impossible precision. For every human vessel that fell, 10 ships died. Watched his fleet being torn apart. He watched ships that had conquered 100 worlds burn and break. He watched the predators become prey. The battle lasted less than 3 hours. When it was over, the attack fleet was debris. Its flagship drifted alone, its engines dead, its weapons silent. Around it, human ships moved through the wreckage, scanning for survivors. A human shuttle docked with the flagship. Soldiers in black armor moved through the corridors, securing prisoners. They were efficient and professional. They did not kill anyone who surrendered. They did not torture. They did not gloat. Was taken to a holding cell. A human officer came to see him, a young man with calm eyes. "Your crew will receive medical attention," the officer said. "You will be returned to space once the occupation is complete." Stared at him. "You are not going to kill me." The officer looked surprised by the question. "No, why would we?" "Because that is what we would do. That is what any species would do." The officer shook his head. "We are not any species. We came here to stop you from hurting people. That is all. When you stop being a threat, you stop being our problem." He left, sat alone in his cell trying to understand what had happened. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. They had been defeated. Not just defeated, destroyed. A human fleet had appeared from nowhere and annihilated the most feared predators in the region. The Council scrambled for information. How had the humans built such a fleet? Where had it come from? What else were they hiding? But the humans were not answering questions. They were too busy liberating occupied worlds. System after system, the populations they had conquered watched in amazement as human ships arrived, delivered supplies, and then moved on. No demands, no conditions, just freedom. On the council, the High Speaker watched the reports come in. Each one was more impossible than the last. The humans were winning, not just winning, dominating. And they were doing it while following rules that they had never considered. Military targets destroyed, civilian infrastructure preserved, prisoners treated humanely, medical care provided to anyone who needed it. The speaker had expected monsters. What it saw was something far more frightening. It saw a species that had chosen to restrain itself, a species that had the power to destroy but used it only to protect, a species that had hidden in plain sight for almost a century, waiting for the day when the galaxy's protectors would fail. That day had come, and now the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the Battle of Threshold, the hegemony collapsed. It was not humanity that destroyed them. When the human fleet stopped at the original borders, they simply stopped. No invasion, no conquest, no revenge. They had come to protect the weak, not to become the next predators. But their victory had broken something. For 2 centuries, they had ruled through fear. Their subject species had obeyed because they believed they were unstoppable. Now everyone knew they were not. The rebellion started within weeks. Slave worlds rose up. Conquered peoples found weapons and courage they had hidden for generations. They tried to crush them, but their military was shattered. Every time they gathered enough ships to strike, human observers appeared at the edge of their space, watching and waiting. They understood the message. Any attack on the rebels would bring humanity back, and this time they might not stop at the border. Within 6 months, the hegemony was gone. They retreated to their home system, a broken people surrounded by species they had tormented for centuries. They would spend the next 100 years trying to survive the peace they had never shown to others. The galaxy watched all of this with a mixture of awe and terror. The council met in emergency session after emergency session, trying to understand what had happened and what it meant. They had been the masters of galactic civilization for 12,000 years. They had built the rules. They had maintained the order. They had decided who was strong and who was weak. Now a species they had dismissed, as children, had changed everything. The High Speaker led a diplomatic delegation to Earth. It was the first time in the Speaker's million-year existence that it had traveled to a younger species. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. They landed outside a small city in a region that humans called Portugal. The weather was warm. The sky was blue. Birds sang in trees that had existed since before the discovered space travel. Met them at the landing site. She was wearing simple clothes, not the formal robes of an ambassador. She looked older than she had 6 months ago. There were new lines on her face and new gray in her hair, but her eyes were the same, calm and clear. "High Speaker," she said, "welcome to Earth." The speaker studied the small human woman. 6 months ago, this person had walked away from the most powerful institution in the galaxy. She had gambled everything on a secret fleet and a war that should have been unwinnable. She had changed the course of history. "Ambassador," the speaker said, "we have come to discuss the future." Nodded. "I expected you would. Please follow me." She led them not to a government building or a military headquarters, but to a small house with a garden. An old woman sat on the porch, shelling beans into a bowl. A young girl played in the dirt nearby, building something with sticks and stones. "My mother said, and my granddaughter Sophia." The speaker was confused. This was not how diplomatic meetings were conducted, but it followed into the garden, where chairs had been set up in the shade of a large tree. Sat down and began helping her mother with the beans. The speaker remained standing, uncertain how to proceed. "You have questions," said, Ask them. The speaker had many questions. It started with the most important one. Why did you hide your strength? For 87 years you pretended to be weak. You followed our rules, you accepted our guidance. Why? Considered the question. She picked up a bean pod and split it open with her thumbnail. We did not hide our strength, she said. We hid our fear. Fear? You built the largest hidden fleet in galactic history because you were afraid. Yes, looked up at the ancient being. We know what we are. Every human knows. We carry the memory of what our species did to itself before we reached the stars. Wars that killed millions. Weapons that poisoned our world. Hatred that burned through generations. She gestured at the peaceful garden around them. This is what we built after we nearly destroyed ourselves. This is what we learned, but we never forgot what we were capable of. That knowledge lives in every human heart, the capacity for terrible violence, the will to fight until nothing is left. Went back to shelling beans. We joined your council hoping you could teach us to be better. We thought that species who had survived for millions of years must have found wisdom that we lacked. We thought you could show us how to be peaceful without being weak. And what did you learn? The speaker asked. His hand stopped moving. We learned that you survive by looking away. When the strong hurt the weak, you close your eyes. When predators hunt the innocent, you offer sympathy. You call this wisdom, you call this peace. She shook her head. It is neither. It is cowardice dressed in ancient robes. The words hung in the air. The speaker felt them like physical blows but did not argue. 6 months ago, it would have dismissed such criticism as the ignorance of a young species. Now it was not so sure. What do you want? The speaker asked finally. You have proven your power, you could demand anything. You could remake the galaxy in your image. Looked at her granddaughter, who had wandered over to show her the structure she had built from sticks. I want Sophia to grow up in a galaxy where no one has to be afraid, said. Not afraid of predators, not afraid of abandonment, not afraid that if something terrible happens, no one will come to help. She smiled at the child and sent her back to play. Humanity is not rejoining the council. Your rules allowed the to exist. Your peace was built on the suffering of the weak. We will not be part of that. The speaker felt something it had not felt in shame. Then what will you do? We are forming something new. The Compact of Free Worlds. Membership is voluntary. There is only one rule. No member will be abandoned to predators. Stood and walked the speaker to the edge of the garden. From there, they could see the city in the distance, where humans went about their daily lives. Dozens of species have already joined, said. Hundreds more are watching. They are not coming to us because we are strong. They are coming because we proved that we will use our strength to protect them. The speaker looked at the human world, so young, so fragile, so terrifyingly determined. We underestimated you, the speaker said. For 87 years, we saw what we expected to see. We never imagined that the children we tolerated were hiding an empire. Shook her head. We were not hiding an empire. We were hiding a decision. The decision to never let fear control us. The decision to never look away from suffering. The decision to be better than our nature, even when it would be easier to be worse. She looked at the ancient being with something like sympathy. You have spent 12,000 years teaching the galaxy to survive. Perhaps it is time to learn something new. Perhaps it is time to learn how to live. The speaker had no response. It returned to its ship and left Earth, carrying words with it. On the journey home, it thought about everything it had seen. The humans were not what the council had believed. They were not reckless children or hidden monsters. They were something far more complex. A species that knew its own capacity for darkness and had chosen to be something else. In the final report to the council, the speaker wrote, We spent 12 teaching the galaxy to survive. In less than a century, the humans have begun teaching it to live. We should pay attention. Back on Earth, sat in her garden as the sun set. Her granddaughter had fallen asleep in her lap, tired from a day of playing. Watched the stars appear one by one. Somewhere out there, the compact was growing. Species that had been abandoned by the council were finding new hope. Predators who had once hunted without fear were learning that the galaxy had changed. It was not peace, not yet. There was still too much pain, too much fear, too much history to overcome, but it was a beginning. Held her granddaughter close and allowed herself to hope. Maybe humanity's anger could become something better. Maybe all the violence and fear in human hearts could be transformed into protection for the weak and justice for the forgotten. Maybe the galaxy was finally learning that true peace was not the absence of war. True peace was the presence of those willing to stand between the innocent and the darkness. The fireflies came out as the last light faded. Sophia woke up and chased them across the garden, laughing. Watched her and smiled. This was what they were fighting for, this small moment, this simple joy, this world where children could play without fear. It was worth everything, it always had been. The stars burned overhead, and humanity stood watch, and the galaxy began to change.